Hello, and welcome to the video commentary for Goblin, Issue 9A. I am Solomon Mars, creator of Goblin, Volume 1 of the 555 saga. We'll just tear right into this. This cover is actually just an interior page replicated. I thought it looked good. I thought it would work well as a cover. So I just used the picture and superimposed a translucent image of Amy in the background, because this story involves Amy to a great deal. So yeah. There's not a lot special going on with this cover. Not really. I do love Sapphire's colors, like the color of her outfit. You know, I love that sort of that sunset yellow against that what is that? Is that ochre? Burnt sienna? I'm not sure really what that color is exactly, like her scarf and her sleeves are. But I have a thing for t-shirts with stripes on the sleeves and stuff like that. I've had tons of shirts like that in my, I've just had tons of shirts like that, since being a little kid all the way up to, now. I've had shirts like that. They never really stopped being popular. They're just fun shirts, and so I've just always had kind of just a love for them. I love the design of them, and especially to put them in colors that I've never seen before. And I find that actually is happening a lot more now in reality. I find that people are using these kinds of shirts. I forget the name of them. I forget the type of shirt it is, but it doesn't matter. But a lot of other people are thinking the same way that I'm thinking and applying it to the actual, like, real shirts. They're using color combinations that have never been used in I guess, fashion, in clothing before, and that's really cool. Alright, so we start off and the Rock Eater is working on stuff in the background. That little jar that she was carrying on her back actually is she uses it to carry when sometimes she goes out into the field and she'll pick a lot of berries and things like that, and she'll mash them up and she'll pour them in there and she'll carry them in there to bring back, and because she may need a large quantity of one specific berry or mineral or some form of something, she'll carry it in one of those, and then she'll use it to pour out. It's like having a bag of flour and then pouring parts of it out into a measuring cup, and that's all it is. But she's just kind of conversing with Amy, getting to know Amy a little bit. She knows Jeff, Jeffusra. She knows him. It's her grandson. I mean, even though it's been like what? I think it's been a year or so. It's been a while since he left. I think it's only been a little over a year since he left the Red Castle. And even though like he's grown and changed in that time, he's still Jeff. She knows him. He's still the same person at his core, but she doesn't know Amy at all. And it's interesting to her that this girl is traveling with her grandson, who up to this point has been very, a very solo, very individualistic person. He's not the kind of person to have a companion, that travels with him. And so, I mean, not only Amy, but even Sankofa, they both interest her, because it sort of represents a changing of the guard in Jeffusra. It it means that he's growing, which is kind of, I'll be honest, for her character, this is, ooh, that was weird. Wow, that was really weird. My computer was actually doing some stuff there. It means that he's growing, and this is actually what she was hoping would happen for him. That he would change, he would grow, he would actually grow up and let go of his that anger, all that anger and hate that he had when he was younger, which is part of the reason why she was really okay with him going off on his own, because maybe he would find himself. I mean, she just kind of left it to to fate and hope that he would find himself. So they're just kind of talking about Jeff and stuff, and I didn't want Amy to come off as this kind of character who is. I didn't want her to be like a purely stereotypical girly character where she's tagging. I didn't want her to seem like she's tagging along with Jeff, who is, he's a male character, but I mean, in all honesty, all of these characters could be either male or female, and it really wouldn't make much of a difference to me. But initially, when I created Jeff, he was male. When I created Amy, she was female. It just happened that way. But they could have completely had a role reversal, or they both could have been both male, both female. It didn't matter, obviously, because at one point in time, I combined the character of Jeff and Amy and made it a female character who pretty much acted a lot like Jeff, but looked like a girl, and had some of the, many of the attributes of, like characteristically of Amy, but still was sort of angry and aggressive and things like Jeff. Obviously, for obvious reasons, that didn't work out. You can't have those two characters in one frame. It created all sorts of conflict. And it's just better to have characters bouncing off of each other, playing against each other, like separate characters, not in one, not like one character who has voices in their head or something, which wasn't the case, but it would have worked out that way had I stuck with that blending of the two. But I didn't want her, to seem like she was trying to win Jeff over, and she was being nice to him, but she's nice to everyone. And I didn't want her to seem like she was trying to be his friend, like going out of her way to be his friend or anything. She's just a friendly person. She's just, kind of nice like that. And she asked Jeff for his help. He helped. And so she stuck around. Or he tried to help. And she stuck around. And really that's all there is. On the, seemingly on the surface to the relationship. Of course, me knowing better and being okay with saying, obviously, there's something bigger, something deeper, something more intricate about the relationship of Jeff and Amy. This companionship. There's something deeper and far more intricate in the whole scheme of the story. Otherwise, the two characters would have never met. Yes, I am. It's just talking about Jeff, and I honestly, originally, I had a sequence in here that showed kind of some of Jeff's origin story, and I removed it and I placed it later on in the story. After 12 is when I placed that. As to some of why Jeff is the way he is, why he's so angry, I put it in here originally, and then I thought about it, and I said, I don't want to throw so much in here at one time, because I had a lot of stuff I needed to get through in this story arc, and that was just one more element too much, honestly, for me. It weighed the story down too much, and it was unnecessary at this point in time. Really, it's okay for them to talk about it, but at the point of, like in as far as what's going on is, this is the Rock Eater talking to Amy. So she would kind of being, seeing as how she doesn't really know Amy too much, and she's trying to get to know her. Yes, she wouldn't tell Amy a bunch of stuff that Jeff himself hadn't told Amy, for respect to, to Jeff. But maybe later in time, as time has passed and she's gotten to know Amy, they would, maybe she would talk a little bit more, or, I don't know. I don't really want to, talk too much about that, because that's just laced with spoilers. So, but it just made sense for me not to have it in this part right now. It didn't make sense for the Rock Eater to tell Jeff's origin story to Amy, who is essentially a complete stranger. But I definitely wanted to hint at the idea that Jeff has enemies that he's made inadvertently. He didn't. His intention wasn't to make enemies, and it's unfortunately what has happened. And you can see it in some of the faces of the people around town that not everybody likes Jeff, which is one of the reasons why he left. He's not well liked at the Red Castle. Not really. Not by everybody. And we'll definitely talk more about it. As time goes on. He's peeking around the corner. These guys. And this was the thing, like, initially Jeff didn't know what it was that he was going for. He just thought he was going to go rough up, the Gimme Gang, and to scare them from going back to Frez's place and trying to break into his safe and all this stuff, and maybe even just kind of bring them in and have them arrested. Who knows? But then he realizes that they've actually stolen Frez's Okio stamp. So the whole deal that he struck with Frez in the last issue doesn't even mean anything unless he gets that stamp back. So now he has to confront them in a whole different way. Now they have something that he needs, or at least he feels he needs, and it's actually very valuable. It's actually made of blue iron. I think I talked about this in one of the earlier commentaries. I'm not even sure if I did. I hope I talked about it, but it's made of blue iron, which is it's the rarest of well, it's not made completely of blue iron, but it's it's blue iron encrusted. Parts of it have blue iron attached, and it's the rarest of the minerals on Eravana, and it's the most valuable. It's usually used strictly for coinage, for money, and but occasionally you do get items like this where someone has splurged, and this is what these guys were really after this whole time, because this is worth a lot. Not even as just an Okio stamp that's blue iron encrusted, but they could strip the pieces of blue iron off of it and sell those separate. No one really would question what those pieces were, as long as they are authentically blue iron. They're worth a lot of money. But of course, they plan on selling it to someone else who can probably who probably take it somewhere where he can easily sell it. And Jeff just kind of really mulling this over in his head and thinking about what this really means, and the fact that Frez is really, he hasn't changed, but the fact that he wouldn't tell Jeff about that, just he's just like, it's so of Frez's character, to allow Jeff to walk into something like that, and just let him find out what the situation really was about once he was in it. And he just kind of he trusted that he would come back. I really enjoyed the character designs of these guys, the Gimme Gang. They did go through quite a few design changes, and I wanted them to play a slightly bigger role than they did, but I cut it back a little because they aren't really a big part. Like, I was going to spend a lot more time running around the interior of the castle and stuff, and just kind of showing Jeff's everyday life, like how his life was before he left, kind of, that kind of thing. And I really I decided against it, and decided that I just wanted to continue on with the story, because it's not really necessary to know 100% what Jeff's life was like at the Red Castle in sort of a, I guess, directly. It can easily be talked about through flashbacks. Like, we can easily talk about his life prior to running away in flashbacks, where it would actually be a lot more convenient, showing himself as a younger self, a younger version of himself, and even guys like this would still exist, and that's the thing, So I just kind of made that decision and walked away from it. I walked away and reduced their role in the whole story, and so that's why it just seems like sometimes you can tell when characters like this have speaking parts, and they're fairly well designed. There's a lot of design to them, and yet it seems like they play such a really small part. It's very, very fleeting. It's because they probably had a larger role, and then it was cut. It happens all the time. It especially happens in film. And it's just because, the story is always evolving, and it's evolving even beyond my initial writing, and right up to the point when I'm actually doing the rough pencils on that paper. I'm still right then. I'm making decisions as I'm drawing stuff. I step away from it and look, and I think, does this still work? And sometimes I'll finish an entire book in rough, and I'll flip through and I'll read, all the temporary dialogue that I've put in and everything, and I'll realize some things just don't work. They made perfect sense when I conceptualized them initially, but they just don't work once I'm seeing this near final execution. And I'll take those out, and I'll just take out parts, and I'll reconstruct the story from there. And for any further issues, that has to hurt, getting hit in the head with a trash can. I'm pretty sure that guy would have gotten knocked out. Instead, he's just kind of hurting a little in the background. But all of this was done on purpose. Like, Jeff didn't use logic initially, because he didn't want to draw any attention to the fact that he was a logic smith, because it's illegal, and everyone that's aware of it would instantly prey on him, and it would become overwhelming and also dangerous for regular people who want to have nothing to do with it. And this is sort of his grandmother, the Rock Eater, coming through in his character, stuff that she taught him. You don't endanger regular people. And for the most part, Jeff sometimes disregards this, but once he's back here in his home, all this old stuff about him comes flooding back, and including everything, the things that he's been taught, his anger, the reason. His all these old emotions, and all this old his old psychological self comes back, and just it's the kind of thing that happens to people, when you've grown up in like one town or something your entire life, and and you leave, and not everything was bad, but you leave for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, or even longer, and then you suddenly you come back for whatever reason, and when you come back, the second you're there, everything comes flooding back to you, and that's kind of where he is, and that's why he's acting so strangely, but not really in the case for in the case of him not using logic. It was just to not draw attention to the fact that he's a logic smith, and that really in this case it's not that this case isn't that extreme. He doesn't really have to use it for the sake of defeating these guys. These guys are pretty silly when if we're talking about like gangs. They're not really a gang. They're just a couple of neighborhood thugs, just petty criminals. They're not even as serious as the bandits that were down at the base of the castle down underneath Gutstown. They're not even as serious as that. Look at them. They're so clumsy. I love the way he kicks him over. And this guy, he played a much bigger part initially, and I regret the fate of this character, but because he was such a fun design, but so be it. It happens like that sometimes, and he knew that Jeff was a logic smith. And he knows about Jeff's past and that Jeff left and everything. And he kind of hints at stuff. Oh wow, it's a garbage truck coming into the neighborhood, and it's loud. I apologize if that's picking up on the mic. It is very loud. Wow. So this is all live. And he alludes to the fact that Jeff ran away, and that's kind of the idea. Like a lot of people thought that Jeff ran away, and that's, well, I probably shouldn't talk about it too much. That's a bit of a spoiler. The idea that he ran away, and Jeff doesn't necessarily see it that way. And originally I talked about all of this in this issue, and I decided to save it for later, to kind of spread out Jeff's origin over the course of a few more issues, kind of going off into, the mini arc that takes place after the Red Castle arc, talking about Jeff's origins and his reasoning for leaving the Red Castle in the first place, But yeah, this is why I love this character here, Cheval. His arms are amazing, and clearly, this is he's had an augmentation done. And that is not common in a small little place like the Red Castle. He would have gone, this guy has clearly been to a very large city. That's where you can get something like that done. An augmentation like that's biomechanical, that's the same technology that's behind the Mercers that were chasing after them when they were, Jeff and Amy, when they were in Dunbar's. Same kind of technology is being applied here. He would have paid a pretty penny for augmentation like that. But yeah. I just love all the flowing arcs of the lines in these pages and stuff. And of course, had to show that the hero doesn't always come out on top every single time. Yeah, that would hurt. Even as an augmentation, it's still attached to nerves. So yeah, it would hurt. This is cool though. In my mind, to some degree, Cheval is he's a slugger himself, but he's not official. Like, he'll slug, and he probably, in some places, can get compensation for the slugs that he brings in, but probably on a more of along the lines of a sort of a black market slug hunt sort of deal. But obviously he's more of a kind of just a bandit. He just does his own thing, and you can see that he can regenerate here. This augmentation allows him to regenerate, which is bad news, really. But unfortunately, there we have his fate. Is being cut through the head by logic. It's not good. Yeah. I just love everyone's reaction. And you see these guys up on the top of a building there. I want to talk about like the design of the interior of the Red Castle, with all the pillars, all the really rusty pillars and stuff. I have a thing about rust, and saying that, I don't mean like I find it gross or disgusting or offensive. I think it's beautiful. This oxidization, of metal, and it's just, I love like the flaking and just the coating and the color change. I don't know. I've always been fascinated with this process, of nature. It's nature sort of reclaiming what man has changed, according to its own liking, and these things that we construct are still very temporary, and you see them sort of decaying right in front of your eyes, and it's just really interesting because it's sort of this beautiful thing, like the way that the colors and the patterns, and I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but I just have collections of photos that I've taken, whenever I see some really interesting rust patterns and stuff, and I have like collections of photos of old machines and things like that, and that's what kind of inspired, all the interior of this place. It's filled with like this steam, it's not like it's humid per se, but I mean, considering that they're further south, it's a little bit more humid. It's very, very humid when you get all the way in the Southlands, but they're pretty close to the border, so it's not as humid. But in the inside of this building, you have all this steam, because a lot of the machines inside of this building are steam powered, and since the Red Castle is so old, it's kind of opening at the seams, and so steam, some of the steam seeps through, and it just kind of fills the area, and nobody really cares. One of the jobs of the Rocky area, she patches a lot of those areas up and stuff, she uses logic to do it. Nobody really questions it because, she's helping these people maintain their homes. But I just like the idea of just this rolling mist always, inside, this large, just really, really large facility, and we'll never actually explore the full extent of the Red Castle, which is kind of a shame. But you know what? Honestly, there are many, many castles on Eravana, and there are many, many castles to explore. So I'm not completely sad that we don't go into every single inch of this place, but there's not that much to explore beyond what I created. What's being presented is pretty much what's all that I initially conceptualized. I just like this scene of them looking down from the rooftop. And I just instantly wanted to establish like sort of the role or the relationship that these three have with each other, where Sune and 26 are constantly going at each other. They're constantly making remarks about each other's professionalism or whatever. And Sapphire is kind of on the outside, and while she's not necessarily the leader, she kind of takes this sort of big sister, or well, almost like the neutral middle kid role, like they're a family, and she's sort of not, because she's not like the big sister. Sune is more so the big sister, and Sapphire is sort of the middle sibling, and she sort of takes that role in where she's neutral. And she tries to keep them from going at each other, the youngest and the oldest. Even though, none of them are related. They're not related at all. But they have that sort of relative sort of relationship with each other. And it's just, they've been together for that long, And I just love, that relationship. It was funny in my head, it's not supposed to necessarily be funny, but relatable to anyone that has brother, sister, or brothers and sisters, or actually even close friends that you've known for several years. Eventually get to that point in your friendship where you're almost like family, and your relationship is like that, where you're just kind of like picking on each other and stuff, and just them hunting. And I also kind of wanted to establish some of their personality. Like Sune is sort of, she's very relaxed and very casual, and takes everything just with a grain of salt. Everything's funny to her. It's all comedy. It's all drama. It's all tragedy. Everything is just dumb. It's just, well, not dumb, but it's just, she doesn't take anything really seriously. It's all laughable. She's very full of herself, and her abilities. And 26 is more composed and very, he's very, I'm not even actually sure of the exact word that there's a word I'm thinking of, and I can't quite, it's on the tip of my tongue, but he's more, he keeps to himself a little bit more, and he's not as outgoing as actually either Sune or Sapphire. Definitely not as much as Sune. Sapphire is more of the aggressive, but manipulative one. That's why she seems like she's taking the leadership role initially. But the truth is that 26 is more so the leader of this group. But Sapphire is more of the manipulative one in the group. She's the sort of the one that's always thinking, and is always speaking. Always talking. It's always saying exactly what's on her mind. Thinking, speaking, taking action, but thinking it through. Whereas Sune is the one that takes action but doesn't think it through. She lets her emotions drive her more so. And 26 is more calculating. And I just wanted to show, and there's the picture that I used for the cover. And you can, and this plays right into exactly what I was saying, where you see Sapphire is saying, no, we'll make him take us to him, then we'll kill him. And she's just thinking it through. Whereas they were like, well, do we just kill him now, or what do we do? Do we kill him and then hunt, or and track down our target, or what? And she's like, no, we'll make him take us to him. Yeah. And then we go back to Amy and Rocketer and their conversation, and getting a little bit more into talking about Jeff and explaining his situation, and at the same time talking about Amy. And this is like the first time that, and I love that Amy is a little flustered because the Rock Eater knows what Mumu is. She talks about the Melono grub, and she knows what he is. And Amy's she's a little taken back, because up to this point, Jeff didn't know, and so it's just kind of like, whoa, and it's just kind of funny, it's a very casual conversation that they're having while she's figuring out Amy, and not trying to make Amy uncomfortable. She's trying her best to make Amy comfortable in the situation while still getting information from her. And I just thought it was interesting. Like she really figured out Amy, pretty quick. She was like the idea that she was seeking Jeff, a logicsmith, to help protect her and Mumu. And it's just in this statement, she was like, that Jeff is very talented, but he's not nearly patient enough to learn what it would take to protect Amy. And I just like that statement where she's not bad-mouthing Jeff, but she's letting Amy know that Jeff is good at, he's a good logicsmith. And clearly he has potential, but he's not there yet. He's still very young, and while we're all prone to making mistakes at any age, Jeff more so at this point is prone to making mistakes and really not being skilled enough to protect Amy. And it's just kind of funny. I like she's like Amy and Mumu. Mumu is just like a little pet to her. It's an interesting little relationship they have, and I like treating him like he's like a little puppy or a little kitten sometimes. Technically, he is. I mean, he's a grub, so he's an insect. So technically, he's an animal, and so even more so, he's a domesticated animal. So yeah, he's like a little puppy or a little kitten or something like that. And of course, this is where we get into discuss the two of them discussing the scars on Jeff's wrists. I'll actually get more into that a little bit later. I'll talk some more about this in a later commentary, but it's just really interesting, them talking about it, and she explains to Amy what she believes this to be, and it's this a part of logic ataxia, which is chaos, and it's really dangerous. It's a shortcut. It's sort of a blood pact, and it's just kind of a dangerous way of becoming more powerful. Gaining enlightenment and learning more logic. Basically without having to learn and practice and stuff, you kind of get instant gratification, and you're instantly able to use logic. And she believes that's what it is. And so she's talking about it, and she's hinting at the idea that, or rather the fact that Jeff has made similar misguided decisions. And she thinks that Sankofa is possibly the cause. Initially, there was an entire sequence where I showed her actually, touching Sankofa while he was still in this orb to kind of look into his mind. But I kind of cut that part because I didn't see it, as necessary to show it. Literally just showing her touching. But I'll talk about that in a minute, as soon as we, get past this portion of Jeff running from these three, chasing across the rooftops. I love rooftop chases. They're really awesome. Very dangerous, but really awesome. I have had an equivalent to a rooftop chase. Not really being chased, but trying to get somewhere with my friend, and we had to get down from the roof of an old abandoned factory down to the ground floor in time to we had to we were at a transitional graffiti yard, and we had permission by the owner of the property to convert it into a graffiti yard. And that means we had permission to come up there and paint and do big pieces and murals over time. And so we spent this entire summer doing this, and we're up there on the roof admiring an older piece that my friend had done, and we look and we see a police car actually drive up. And he pulls up to where all of our equipment, our bags with our spray cans and all this stuff, it's in our sketchbooks, black books, are sitting down there on the ground, and we're on the top of this building, and we see them pulling up, and we just know that they're going to try to take everything and maybe try to arrest us, and we have permission. We had a signed permission slip. We had this guy's written permission with a phone number and everything. So we knew we had to get down there in a hurry. So we're jumping and we're running down from this roof and stuff, and we're moving, and we hit this area. I feel like I've already told this story, but we hit this. Did I tell this story already? I'm afraid I might have. Anyways, we hit this point where we're inside of the warehouse, the abandoned warehouse, and it's dark in there, and I'm running. We're running at top speed so that we can get down there in time. And I saw my friend jump, and I didn't know why he jumped. I just assumed he was jumping for to increase his speed. He was just really excited, to kind of get out there in time. It was an adrenaline rush, and I found out very soon why he jumped. Because suddenly I fell, and I fell. There was a hole because it was a factory that had multiple tiers, and they didn't close all. They just when the warehouse went out of business, the factory went out of business. They just abandoned it. They just left. They took all of the equipment out, all of the merchandise out, and left everything the way it was. So parts of it were open, and this bottom is open. This patch in the floor is open, and there was piping underneath there for the roof of the lower level. And luckily, I didn't fall all the way through, but it wasn't big enough for me to slip all the way through. But I fell far enough in that I fell and banged my shins on this large pipe that was in there, because that's how fast I was moving. And I think about that. I mean, it cut my shins wide open. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. But I walked it off, and I went out there and went and I was standing there, in pain while we're talking to the police officers, and we gave him, that was resolved. We gave him the piece of paper, and they called the phone number, and the guy told him, yeah, I gave him the permission and stuff. I own the property, and he talked to them for a while, and then they were like, okay, well, just be careful, wander around and don't wander around inside the warehouse, which thought was, I guess there was a little irony there, as I was standing in pain, hidden pain, bleeding, And they're saying, be careful. And it's like, wish you had said that an hour ago. And I think about that every time I think about a rooftop chase. I know that was a really, really odd and long story, but that's what I think about when I think about rooftop chases. I think about that when you jump from rooftop to rooftop, there's the potential that you might not make it. You could easily just fall, or you may land halfway onto the next roof, and it just, I don't know. It's just kind of funny to me. Wonderful little anecdotes. And so, I kind of introduced this this staff, which, yeah, it's a bat. It looks like a baseball bat, but essentially, a baseball bat is a short staff. It could be used just like any other staff weapon. And this one's not a baseball bat. It's actually considered a staff because, well, they don't have baseball on Aravana. And it's got its incantations on it, and the incantations that are on here obviously are stronger than most stuff that's been depicted in Goblin so far, because they actually transition from white to black, which means they're strong. These are strong incantations. So it's a formidable weapon. Not something you really want to play around with, and not something you want to get hit with, really. It probably could. It could do a lot of damage, if not tear a person in half. Being swung at least by the right person. So Jeff he's just confused. He doesn't understand why they're after him. I love a lot of these, the pictures of these giant iron pillars in the background, and it just shows how big this town is that's above Gutstown. This is in an area above Gutstown. This is like the market and stuff, and some people live in this market, but most of them, this is just merchants and things like that. These aren't necessarily homes. They're businesses and things like that. But even in a place like the Red Castle, different people live in different sections based on their perception of personal wealth. And it's just like, it's just one more of those realities of, even in like a place that we would consider poverty stricken, there's still a hierarchy of self-worth and worth within a community. I mean, even in like a tribe, like a tribe, there's a hierarchy as far as who's important and why they're important, and their living situation based on this importance, their significance, and to the community, and their relevance to the community. And I mean, the same thing kind of applies here, but on more of a structured society than just people kind of living ragtag. They're not just the shantytown was just one aspect of this entire place. I mean, if you look at where the Rock Eater lives, contrasted to this, she lives probably better than people in even this area live. These people live better than the people in the shantytown live down in Gutstown. But each of these people are sort of in transition. Like, the people in Gutstown are generally not permanent people. These are people that are just passing through most times. Some of them live there and don't really care as long as they have a home. Excuse me. But then you have someone like Rock Eater who's been there so long, she's really made a place for herself. This is where she lives. But these I love these giant pillars. These things are, they're so awesome, and they just kind of go on forever. And you can see like there's some in the background that just kind of go on. I just had a lot of fun with all of these, and just the textures. I just went crazy with the textures and the rust and just the oxidization that's going on. And you can you can see where they've been repaired, and they just kind of slap a plate on top, and then just rivet. They put it in its place and just kind of walk away, and just quick fixes. This was kind of an interesting thing. They kind of pointed out that not every logic smith is the same. They don't all learn the same things. There are many of them that have learned, like, the basics of logic are almost universal. But then there's so many different, I guess, schools of thought is one way to put it. But they're called like Boca of the Enlightened, which are like literally the books that they can read from, study from, that have been written down, all these different incantations, what they might apply to, what their what their origins are, things like this, and so these different schools of thought exist, and there are several that even one specific school of thought may splinter off into other schools of thought where, like, for instance, the school of thought that J. Mephisto comes from is one, initially, one that he learned directly from, is kind of based on the teachings of Saint Cecil, the patron saint of shotguns. And so his is, a very offensive rather than defensive method or approach to logic. And at some point, someone in history thought, well, does it have to be that way? And they thought, well, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to use this specific brand of logic for that purpose. And so they went off and they formed their own school of thought and their own methodologies, and they had their own way of doing things, and they had their own students. And just, that's the way the whole history goes. And so what Jeff is doing, they find very interesting. It's very unique that he's actually using logic. He's pushing it through down to his feet, and it's creating a magnetic bond, and it's allowing him to run up the side of this building. Not the building, but the side of this pillar, and that's not something that they can do. And so they think it's really interesting, and Sune she's obviously finding it far more interesting than 26 or Sapphire. She's just laughing so much. I kind of cut down on that laughter in later issues. I didn't want her to seem like she was really that immature. But yeah, and you can kind of see here, you see that he's using it to sort of push himself up the side of this pillar, but kind of keep him stuck to it. His feet are kind of sticking to it as he's moving. And they're just, and of course, more playing on their character types, and 26 acts like he's not impressed by it. He's like, meh, whatever. His skill is pathetic, and Sune is really interested. She's kind of like, I wonder where you learned that. And Sapphire is, she's kind of dismissive of it, but she sees it as, well, if he knows that, he probably knows some other stuff, and this might actually be a fun fight. She knows that they're going to have to fight this guy at this point, and she's like, yeah, this might actually be fun. If he knows that, then he might know other stuff that might give us a challenge. She's always looking for a challenge, and of course, since they don't know how to do what Jeff does, they sort of run up the pillars as much as they can, and then they just sort of jump. They sort of repel themselves back and forth across the pillar, pushing themselves all the way up, which was just, it's kind of a fun idea. Originally, I was going to have every single step of them going all the way up, and I just decided against it. It wasn't necessary. And flashback time. Clearly, this is not present time, and I really hope no one got too thrown off by this abrupt change, but it's for a reason. And you can see here, like Jeff obviously meeting Sankofa for the first time, finding him in this old abandoned temple, which is actually an old abandoned Doma of the Enlightened that he found him in, which we'll talk about more some other time. And you can see that, it was heavily coated with incantations, which means, Sankofa, they took every single measure to contain Sankofa for a reason, obviously. Whether or not it was because he was good or bad, that's up in the air. And, it could have been his enemies who did it. And, his enemies may be good or bad. It's up in the air. But obviously, there was a reason for him to be contained. They felt it necessary, rather, to contain him, whoever it was. And so, there's just this whole sequence of images. And this was actually me just kind of having fun playing with the old design of Jeff as far as his hair, with his little pompadour. And getting to show like him slightly younger. You see like his hands and arms there's no cuts and scars and stuff really, and he's not wearing his wristbands because this is before he had the incantations on his wrists. And of course, Sankofa just looks way more intense and a lot more deviant there, and that's just kind of interesting. And throughout all the pictures, Jeff's his articles of clothing change color. They change color. They change design, and it's kind of like everything looks really strange. The coloring of everything is really odd, and it's all on purpose. Because the truth of it is that we're actually inside of Sankofa's mind. And memories are not always solid. Even if we had the ability to go in and tap into our own memories and have them projected on a screen, still they wouldn't be as 100% as when we lived them. The memories wouldn't be completely perfect to the actual event, and it's because the mind can distort memories. Even memories can even be slightly distorted, and it's just the nature of the human mind and just memory. And I wanted to kind of convey that things kind of got sort of muddy a little inside of Sankofa's mind, but he still remembers a lot of things. And that just kind of plays into his character and his situation, is that his memories are very, very diluted, and there's just a lot of information there, but it's all disorganized and distorted, and he can't quite remember everything exactly. And more on that later in the actual story. We'll actually get to talk about that. And there's someone speaking, they know like that incantation. That incantation that was just shown, it was very complex. If you look at it, very, very complex. Again, many, many layers, many different solid colors of incantation lines and things like that. And of course, then we see this shadowy figure getting closer, sitting over a container that's smoking. Some sort of weird sort of mist coming out of it and stuff. And then he turns and he looks a lot like Sank, but in a very humanoid form. A little freaky there. Don't have a lot to say about that. Except for don't take everything for face value. When we talk about the mind, all of us have an inner self that is different than our actual self. Some of us have multiple selves inside, that are all of our different selves, different things, different levels of morality and just, different aspects of our personality manifest themselves in different ways. And so that's all that kind of, this is what's being played with here is maybe that's what Sankofa would look like. Maybe he had a body at one point in time. Now that, we know that he has been placed in the sprite body. That's a logic artifact that he's in, but maybe this is what he looked like, or maybe this is just his inner self. This is his, the character of him in his mind. And then, Reduha returning with some clothes. He went to, go get some clothes for Amy. And he returns, only to find the Rocky had passed out on the floor. And that was because, there was, like I said before, there was a scene where I showed her actually tapping into Sankova's mind. And I just felt it wasn't necessary to be so literal in my depictions of what was going on. I wanted some things to seem sort of mysterious and kind of, like an anomaly, just kind of like, what is going on? But then play out, some parts in dialogue. And I know I often say show things instead of talking about it. But in this case, it was one of those circumstances where I could easily just have Amy say, Reduha asked what happened, and Amy just says, I'm not sure. She was doing something to Sankova, looking to his mind, I think. And then she fainted. Simple. It's not a lot of exposition. There's not a lot of dialogue, and it's straight to the point. And if you notice, like Sankofa is out of the incantation that was encasing him. He's no longer in the little jelly orb, and his flame is actually going, but he's still got his eyes closed. And you're talking and. I was supposed to show Reduha using the wake herb that he's talking about. It's really like smelling salts. It's just a really pungent herb, and you put it under someone's nose, and they'll wake up. Sometimes, depending on what knocked them out. And I was going to put that scene in, and I didn't, and I slightly regret not putting it in there, but. And they wake up, and as soon as she wakes up, this plate in the floor is knocked open, and I love just the way that it's knocking over the jars on the table against the wall over there. It's just kind of a weird sort of secondary thing. I could have just made it seamless, but I decided no, I'll have some extra stuff going on, just and just kind of crawling out, and that's actually one of their emergency exits. There are several emergency exits in that room, and this is one of them. And apparently, and just in this this simple statement, I'm kind of slightly alluding to the fact that maybe Jeff has used it before. And you see Amy in her new outfit, which I love. I love her new outfit. I really like the way the colors work together. And it definitely will make more sense when you see her in the environments that are coming up. But it's also, it plays up to the fact that the characters change, they grow, they're evolving. This is their life. None of us wear the same outfit over the course of our life, so why should the characters? Jeff has gone through several shirts, but Amy has been wearing the same attire the entire time, so it's like it was time for her to change, and this won't be the last outfit that she wears. She's going to change outfits several times, and so will Jeff and many of the other characters that come through the story. But I just like, I don't know, I like the colors and had fun with this kind of explosion and using, it's not so much an explosion as it is the the ground sort of just kind of being ripped apart. That's Sune using her power, which is a little bit. It's less restrained. It's less. I guess restrained isn't quite the right word. It's more chaotic than the Rock Eaters, but the same. And I'll talk about it more in the next few commentaries when you actually see her using it more frequently, and I'll explain more so why as I get further on through the story. But I had fun with this picture a lot. There's several layers going on here. And actually now you can see that Sankofa has opened his eye. He's fully awake now. And just trying to move events along, just trying to get things going, move, constantly pushing the story forward as fast as possible without it becoming too chaotic and just, tripping over itself. But, making sure that I retain a level of action that can, push the story forward and not hanging around on certain events for too long. I mean, tell a story, then give a little action. Tell a story, give a little action. Not always in that order. Sometimes it can be entire action, and sometimes it can be entire story. But always finding a happy medium, a balance between the two. Trying to always find a balance between the two. Is something that I've always pushed myself to do. Because I never really enjoy when a story is all action or all dialogue. I prefer when, even if there's just a little bit of one of the other, it still helps round out a story. Ultimately, because that's ultimately what's going on here. I'm telling a story. So if I just gave you tons and tons of action, and I've seen it, a lot over, just in several books, where it's just one. It's too much of one of the other and not a good balance, or it's all one and not the other. Some stories, of course they're going to be dialogue, character driven, and they're not going to have action per se. But action can take many different forms. It can just take the form of someone going from their home to the subway train to their job. And if there's a sense of immediacy to it, then, that's action. If they're late, and so they're trying to get there, fast enough to not get in trouble with the boss, then that's still action. Even in a very story, dialogue-driven, character-driven scenario, that's still considered action. And you can find a happy medium, and that's what I've been trying to achieve. Not just with this story, but just in general with all my storytelling. And I was definitely hinting at the idea that 26 is blind, and so he's always talking about the things that he smells. And I wasn't sure if it came across right off the bat that he's blind. I want to say that at some point Sune calls him blind. She calls him like a blind fool or something. I'm pretty sure she does at some point. If she didn't, I meant for it to be in there. It was definitely something that she was supposed to say. But it's just right away, Sethire can identify this as the workshop. She calls it a den, but of a logic smith, and a master logic smith at that. And 26 likes the smell. He likes the smell. He can almost taste the energy in the room, like the logic, because she uses logic all the time. It sort of leaves sort of a charge in the air, and that's just kind of how it is. That's a reality that we exist with. That a lot of people don't. It's at least I've noticed a lot of people don't notice this sort of thing, where you can be in a place that is kind of heavy on electronics or near a power plant, and you can almost taste the charge in the air. You can feel it on your body, your hair, the hairs on your arm or the hairs on your head stand on end. You can feel it. It tingles through you. Like I can feel it sometimes during a lightning storm. I can sometimes feel it. There's a charge in the air. I'm walking outside and I can feel it. I can taste it. And it happens. Just even when you're around some electronic devices, and a lot of people just kind of ignore it. But it is our reality. It's not something that if we paid attention to it, it would make a great difference in our life. But maybe there is something to be learned of paying attention to that nature. That is still nature, and we don't see a lot of these things as nature. But everything is nature. There is a natural aspect to everything. Everything comes from nature. The machine that I'm recording this on comes from nature. All the things that create it, that make it, came from a natural state at some point. Even the synthetic parts of it still had to be made up, composed of something that has a natural base. And I could go on forever about this kind of stuff, but back to Goblin. And so Sankofa is fully awake and speaking, and I like the Rock Eater's expression. She's not exactly happy to see him awake and moving, not after what she's seen. And then, of course, this is sort of my big reveal. Of course, me doing what I like to do, subverting expectations. And so they say, he's here! And it's just like, I was hoping that people would assume instantly that the whole time they've been pursuing Sankofa. Because up until this point, Sankofa has been sort of the enigmatic puzzle piece. He's sort of this anomaly in the story. It's like, well, what is his deal? He seems like he's very powerful, he seems very important, and but why? What is his deal? And I wanted to kind of play on that a little bit more, and a little, and then you see Amy's reaction, and I love, I didn't want to reduce the character of Amy into this sort of stereotypical helpless, defenseless girl, but the truth of it is that to some extent she is. To some extent they all are helpless in the sense that they are just mortal. All of them are just mortal and just passing through life. And so they're all essentially helpless, but as we do, sometimes we act tougher for the sake of other people, even though inside we know for a fact that we are subject to mortality and defenseless. And there's something for all of us that can make us feel small and helpless. And up to this point, Amy has been, for the most part, very strong, a little strange, a little helpless, but not really so much, but somewhat strong, very independent. And at this point, she's just kind of reduced to tears, just kind of being at the threshold of such an event, of these pursuers being face to face, and being a very real thing now. No longer are they just an idea that, she's being pursued. They are there in front of her. And then, it's officially revealed that they're after Mumu. And, that's just me kind of, subverting, 100% subverting the expectations of the readers. Hopefully, I threw people for a loop there. That is Goblin issue 9. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for sitting with me through this commentary. I hope it didn't bore you too much, really. Um, um, Hopefully, I guess I keep saying, hopefully you'll join me on the next commentary. And I mean, hopefully you will, really. I honestly hope that, you enjoy these stories and the series and even these commentaries. I try to not talk about exactly what's going on in the exactly on the pages, and more so about what was going on as I was creating them, or what was going on in the process of their development, or even the characters or the environments, or like years before I ever sat down and drew this page, or these pages, or the book, or even the entire series. There's stories about all of it, and different things, from dreams and from my reality, my own personal history and things that I've witnessed that come into play. And I just kind of want to make the commentary just kind of a little bit of all of that. No commentary, whether it's film or otherwise, I feel should just be specifically talking about exactly what is being seen, 100%. It just doesn't, especially technical talk. Technical talk for me can be boring. Sometimes it can be exciting and interesting, but sometimes it can be very boring. So hopefully this hasn't been boring, and hopefully it's been interesting, not necessarily insightful, but just kind of a way of bridging the slight gap that is between me having been the creator and of this story, and maybe you being the reader of the story. I mean, kind of hopefully bridging that gap. It's not a huge gap because it's not like I don't read a bunch of stories myself. I mean, I go and read other people's works all the time. You never stop being a fan, hopefully, just because you create your own stuff. So yeah, thank you, and goodbye.